Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network on Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin. Thank you so much for joining me on Mondays and Wednesday mornings, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Thank you so much for joining me on Morning Joe and making J&J Media Networks a part of your weekday morning plans. So, a lot to get into. Great Monday Night Football matchup I'm going to touch on between the Rams and the Buccaneers. My top 10 NFL teams coming up in 10 minutes. And you're going to want to stick around in about half an hour. My college football expert and Pac-12 insider, Jonathan Rifkind, is joining me later on in the show. So we've got a jam-packed show for you today. Can't wait to get started. So much to get into. And it's only apropos that we start with the Monday Night Football showdown between the LA Rams and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on a Monday night in Tampa Bay. This was a fantastic game. The Rams win 27-24. And there are a lot of different directions that you can go when you're trying to analyze this game. And I want to give credit to the Rams first and foremost, because this was an impressive win, an impressive victory that most people did not see coming. Most people did not anticipate that the Rams were going to be able to win this game. And it's not for their defense. Their defense has been elite all season. It's the number one defense in the league. I'm going to talk about that. But it's the offense that, to me, while it wasn't perfect by any stretch, and there were a lot of flaws, they did make enough plays to win that game. Now, here's the glaring issue. But also a really positive sign moving forward if you're the Rams. They only rushed the ball for 37 yards in this game. They still won the game. Jared Goff, 39-51, 374 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 god-awful interceptions. That is something he's going to have to clean up. There's no question about that. But the fact that the Rams won that game despite only rushing for 37 yards is remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. And the reality is this. The run game is their calling card. That's what Sean McVay prides himself on making this team built around. The strength of the Rams in years past and even coming into this year was their ability to run the football. They've got three legitimate guys who can run the football extremely well. Malcolm Brown, Darrell Henderson, and Cam Akers. Those 3 guys are actually really effective running the football, and yet they only rushed for 37 yards. So you had to give the ball to Jared Goff to make enough plays. And Jared Goff, this was one of the few games in which the Rams were able to overcome his turnovers. Typically, he throws 2 interceptions. This game's over. You leave Tom Brady 2.5 minutes and a timeout remaining in the fourth quarter, you're going to lose that game. But the interesting thing about the Rams, and I've touched on this so many times, their wide receiving core. They probably have the deepest wide receiving core in the league. Not only is it the deepest wide receiving core in the league, but their ability to run after the catch, yards after the catch. The Rams are one of the best in the NFL. Cooper Kupp, 11 catches, 145 yards. Robert Woods, 12 catches, 130 yards, and a touchdown. Those guys' ability after a catch to absorb contact and continue to rack up yards is what makes them so productive in the NFL and is really what has elevated the Rams, especially on offense. There were a bunch of passes where maybe Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods catches it a yard or 2 short of the first down marker and they turn upfield and are able to pick up an extra 10 yards. That's what makes this team so special. And again, the Rams dominated every facet of this game. Collected more total yards, 413 total yards to just 251 for the Buccaneers. Dominated the passing game, 371 yards to just 209 for the Bucs. They had better third down efficiency, better time of possession. The Rams outplayed the Buccaneers, but those 2 god-awful turnovers. One, you remember that quote that Sam Darnold said when he first played the Patriots of it looks like he was seeing ghosts. Yeah, that one pass from Jared Goff where he literally threw it so prematurely they were trying to set up the bubble screen. He just threw it right into the lap of Jason Pierre-Paul. I was like, Goff, what are you doing? That was an awful timed turnover. And then in the fourth quarter, Rams could have iced away the game. And there's a reason why Sean McVay ultimately ran the ball on that 3rd and 8 in the red zone down the stretch, was because I think deep down it was a combination of he saw how elite his defense was playing, but also I think part of him was a little bit unsure of the ball security and the decision making of Jared Goff. So that's 2. Here's the thing. The Rams defense held the Buccaneers, one of the best running offenses in the league, just to 42 rushing yards. And their secondary on this Rams defense is absolutely spectacular. We know what Jalen Ramsey can do, and he deserves and garners all the attention. But don't forget, Jordan Fuller had 2 interceptions. He was a 6th-round pick in last year's NFL draft out of Ohio State. Darius Williams, who's had to sit behind Marcus Peters and Aqib Talib in years past. He's now playing. He's a disruptor. He dislodges a bunch of passes. This secondary is extremely talented and aggressive and opportunistic for the Rams. And then you look at the stats and you say, well, Aaron Donald didn't have a great game. He didn't even record a tackle. Yeah, but that's because he was double teamed and sometimes triple teamed on every single possession. Think about that. One guy, there are 11 defensive players and 11 offensive players. At times, 3 out of the 11 offensive guys were trying to block one defensive player for the Rams. He's top 3 in sacks in the NFL with 9.5, trailing Myles Garrett. But I can't underscore this enough that even though he didn't record a tackle, his presence on the defensive end line, on that defensive line, that is what makes him so special. He puts so much pressure, and then that secondary just locks you up. And again, Jalen Ramsey did a number on these wide receivers. But the key play, there were a couple key plays in this game. On the first possession for the Buccaneers, Rams are up 7-0. Jalen Ramsey called for a pass interference on a 3rd and 8. That moves the ball forward, allows the Buccaneers to score on that possession. On their second possession, when the Rams and Bucs are tied 7-7, there were 3 straight 3rd and long situations that the Rams defense could not get the offense off the field. 3rd and 9, missed opportunity. 3rd and 6, missed opportunity. And a 3rd and 7 called for pass interference. If you're a defense, if you're head coach Sean McVay, you can't put your team in a better situation. You're saying to yourself, listen, we're putting Tom Brady and the opposing offense in 3rd and longs on 3 straight possessions. We've got the number 1 defense in the league, the number 1 defense in total yards, top 5 against the rush, top 2 against the pass. That's the situation you want to be in. So if it's not for 2 pass interference calls, I don't even know if the Buccaneers score on their first 2 possessions. But this is what I've said about Tom Brady, and this is what I've said about the Buccaneers in the past. The most important thing is to know the strengths and weaknesses of your quarterback. That is the most important thing. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. One of my favorite quotes by Aristotle. If you're a student in high school and you have a project coming up, let's say you're more of an introvert, you're a shy, timid, more reserved kind of individual, and your teacher gives you the option. Do you want to give a PowerPoint presentation and present to the class about what you read, about what you wrote, or would you rather write a 10-page essay and submit it online? You'd be more likely, if you're an introvert, to want to write that essay. And if you're a supportive teacher, you would encourage that student to write an essay as opposed to present a PowerPoint. And it's not because you can't do it, but because you know, and the teacher knows, you'd feel more comfortable writing an essay than giving a public speech to the class. That's what a supportive teacher would do. Tom Brady, throughout his career, what is he known for? He's known for throwing those shorter, intermediate, quick throws over the middle. He likes to get rid of the ball quickly. That's his bread and butter. That's literally what's defined Tom Brady, is his precision and his accuracy on those short third down throws. That's what's made him the greatest of all time. And I still believe he's the greatest of all time. But when you have a guy in Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich that are forcing Tom Brady to throw the ball deep, you're not playing to his strengths. He was 1 for 9 on passes 15 or more yards 2 nights ago. He leads the NFL with the most incompletions on deep ball throws. You're not playing to his strengths. You have to cater to what he's good at. Maybe it's running the ball a little bit more. They only ran the ball 18 times for 42 yards. Now, again, much of the credit goes to the Rams defense and the fact that they've got a top 5 rushing defense, so I understand. But with Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette, it's not like this game got so out of hand that you couldn't even try to run the football. And even if you don't want to run the football and you do want to give the ball in Tom Brady's hands, allow him to thrive by completing shorter throws. It made absolutely no sense to me. And again, I think part of the reason why the Rams have been so successful this year, and now the Rams are 7-3 atop the NFC West division, I think one of the reasons is because they've been able to kind of fly under the radar this year. There wasn't much talk in the preseason and even during the season about expectations for this team. There weren't many expectations heaped onto this team, and so they were able to kind of fly under the radar and excel. And again, Jared Goff, there are 5 games this year where he hasn't thrown an interception, and the Rams are 5-0 in all of those games. He's got to take care of the football better. He's a good quarterback, but he has to transform himself from a good quarterback to a great quarterback for the Rams to win the Super Bowl this year. They have an elite defense. They've got an elite wide receiving core. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Josh Reynolds, now Van Jefferson. This kid out of Florida is fantastic. They've got depth at the tight end position, Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett. They've got playmakers. Again, I talked about their 3-head monster at the running back position. They've got the recipe. Jared Goff has to play better. And the Rams, under head coach Sean McVay, this speaks to his prowess as a head coach. They're 32-0 when leading at halftime. 32-0 when leading at halftime. So the Dodgers won. The Lakers won. Rams are on the come up. And they're positioning themselves to make a serious run in a couple of weeks. So with that, I want to transition to my top 10 current NFL teams in the NFL. Again, this is a very fluid list, changes week by week. I don't come out with this every week. I tend to publish this and reveal my top 10 every 2 to 3 weeks. But regardless, I'm really excited about this top 10, and I think that it might surprise some people. But let's start with number 10, the Seattle Seahawks. Kind of out of sight, out of mind. They beat the Arizona Cardinals on Thursday Night Football. Russell Wilson is still an MVP candidate. I have Patrick Mahomes a little bit ahead of him right now, but Wilson's second most passing yards in the NFL, 30 touchdowns, which leads the NFL. And again, he's working with a defense that has been porous all season long. And yet he's had to come out and lead his offense as a top 4 offense in the NFL. He and DK Metcalf have a great rapport. DK Metcalf, 862 receiving yards. This guy is beasting it up. He's kind of a reincarnation of Marshawn Lynch at the wide receiver position in DK Metcalf. So I've been really impressed with their ability as a team to rebound. Carlos Dunlap, I think, has come in and provided a great punch defensively, kind of replacing that Jadeveon Clowney role from last season. Jamal Adams is healthier, and I think he will finally be healthy after the extended break from playing on Thursday. And again, anytime you have Russell Wilson on your team, and Russell Wilson in my mind is a top 3 quarterback playing like an MVP, I can't have you any less than number 10. And they're tied with the Rams atop the NFC West division. So I have the Seattle Seahawks at number 10. At number 9, the Buffalo Bills. We kind of forget about them, another team, because they were on a bye week. Now, the only reason why I have the Buffalo Bills ahead of the Seattle Seahawks is just because of their head-to-head matchup. It's simple as that. I think that they're pretty interchangeable. I think that the Bills and the Seattle Seahawks are around the same level, but because they beat them, I have the Bills at number 9. The bottom line is this. The Bills have a couple of really quality wins on the season. The Dolphins, the Rams, the Raiders, and the Seahawks. So it's tough for me to justify or not justify having them at number 9 when they're top their division in the AFC East. They've got one of the best records in the AFC as a whole. They've got 4 quality wins. Josh Allen is not playing like an MVP, but compared to years past, he's really stepped up. Stephon Diggs leads the NFL for a wide receiver in most receiving yards. And they have too many quality wins for me to not at least give them the respect and show them the respect by inserting them into number 9. Now, number 8, the Green Bay Packers. I know that their defense is middle of the pack. It's pretty pedestrian. It's not great. When you have Aaron Rodgers on your team, and when you have a guy in Aaron Rodgers who's playing like an MVP, 2,889 yards, 29 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions, you have to give credit where credit is due. And the bottom line is the Packers should have beaten the Colts. They should have beaten the Colts on Sunday. They didn't. So that's why I have them at number 8, but they still have some quality wins on the season. They did beat the Saints. They did beat the 49ers. They've got a potent offense. They've got a very explosive offense. Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones. And again, their defense is middle of the pack, but Aaron Rodgers, while he can't carry you, I'm not sure if he can carry you to a Super Bowl this year. He is certainly good enough. He's great enough to carry you and take you maybe to the NFC Championship game, depending on the matchup. So I got to give credit to the Green Bay Packers. They're still 7-3, still atop the NFC North. And right now they look like a top 10 team to me, especially based on some of their wins. At number 7, the team that handed them their worst loss of the year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I understand if people think that maybe I should drop them or rather put them a little bit behind some of these other teams. But to me, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should be at number 7. They got smacked around by the Saints twice. They lost to the Rams in a tight game at home, and they should have beaten the Chicago Bears. They're 7-4, but again, if you look at some of those losses, the Bears lost, they should have won, in my opinion. And Tom Brady, while his accuracy has certainly dipped, there's no question about that. He's not playing as well or as accurately as we're accustomed to seeing. He's still thrown for over 2,500 yards, still has 25 touchdowns on the season, and their defense is a top 5 defense in the league. Very opportunistic. They've got a bevy of weapons on offense. And again, their defense can keep them in any game. And we've seen that so far. And with a couple of really quality wins, versus the Packers and the Raiders, Brady's still 4th most passing yards. I've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at number 7. At number 6, the Tennessee Titans. They just keep finding ways to win. Another impressive road win in overtime at Baltimore. And Ryan Tannehill, he leads the NFL with the most game-winning drives. I said this before. Now he's got 5 game-winning drives. 5 game-winning drives this year in the NFL that leads the entire league. Derrick Henry is back to running the football like we're accustomed to seeing. He's rushed for over 100 yards in 3 out of his past 4 games. Back-to-back games with over 100 rushing yards against the Ravens. Finished with 133 rushing yards, iced the game in overtime with a 28 monster beast mode run to win that game 30-24. And Tannehill just complements this team very well. He makes a lot of well-timed third down throws. The Titans are top 10 in the NFL on third down conversion this year. And Mike Vrabel is a tremendous coach. And this team is just a matchup nightmare for anyone that they go up against. That's the reality. No one wants to face the Tennessee Titans. Most people's styles don't align well and don't match up well with this team. So the run attack is back, and they've beaten the Bills and the Ravens now. I got to give credit to the Tennessee Titans there at number 6. This is probably going to be my most controversial pick right here. This is going to be my most controversial pick. I've got the Indianapolis Colts at number 5, and I know I'm going to hear about this later after this show. I personally am extremely bullish about the Indianapolis Colts. I've been consistent about this pick the entire season. I've loved everything about this team. And let's be honest for a second. Let's really reflect on this team. If the quarterback was not Phillip Rivers and this was still Andrew Luck, or better yet, just anyone better than Phillip Rivers, would we really not be looking at the Indianapolis Colts saying this is a team that can compete with Kansas City, with the Steelers, with the Saints? Would we really not be looking at the Colts and saying this is not a top 2 or 3 team in the league if their quarterback wasn't Phillip Rivers? All Phillip Rivers needs to do is play decently well. We saw him play decently well against the Packers. 24 of 36, around 270 yards, no interceptions. As long as he doesn't turn the ball over, this team is loaded on the defensive side. Darius Leonard, Xavier Williams, DeForest Buckner. I've talked about this team before. I love this team defensively. And then they've got depth at the wide receiver position. Michael Pittman Jr., T.Y. Hilton. No one even knows about him anymore. They forgot about him, Paris Campbell. And then I love Jonathan Taylor and Naheem Hines as the running backs for this team. So I love the makeup of the Indianapolis Colts. And again, I'm unique, but I'm very bullish about this team. And they've got wins over the Titans, the Bears, the Vikings, and now the Packers. So I'm hard-pressed not to put them at number 5 because they just keep finding ways to win. And they're 7-3. So they've got the edge over the Packers. They've got the edge over the Titans, and the Ravens have fallen off. So right now I have to have the Colts at number 5. At number 4, the Los Angeles Rams. They've got the best defense in the league, guys. Sooner or later, you're going to have to realize this team's got the best defense in the entire NFL. Number 1 in total defensive yards, in total yards allowed, top 5 against the run, top 2 against the pass. As long as Jared Goff doesn't turn the ball over, I just talked about this. The Rams are 5-0 in games in which Jared Goff has not even thrown an interception. Even when he turns the ball over, as long as he doesn't throw an interception, this team finds ways to win. Their defense gives up the fewest fourth quarter points in the entire NFL. That's a big stat. They give up just 3 points per game in the fourth quarter. And I've talked about their weapons before. Great after the catch. That's what makes their wide receivers unique from other teams' wide receivers, is their ability to gain yards after the catch. This Rams team just beat the Buccaneers on the road. Say what you want about Tom Brady. If you go on the road and you beat Tom Brady in a hostile environment, one of the few atmospheres that actually does allow fans into the stadium and into the seats, I got to give you credit for it. They're top the NFC West division. They beat the Seattle Seahawks. So they are in first place of that, in my opinion, the toughest division in the NFL. And right now, the way that their defense is playing, I have to put them at number 4 right now. And number 3, the only other team that I think is better than them right now in the NFC is the New Orleans Saints. Now they're 8-2. I understand Drew Brees is out. The reality is that shellacked the Tampa Bay Buccaneers twice already. They did lose to the Packers earlier this year, but it was without Michael Thomas. So I'm willing to give Drew Brees a little bit of a pass here. And the bottom line is this team has now won 6 straight games. They're the hottest team in the NFL right now. 6 straight games, or at least the hottest team in the NFC. So you look at this New Orleans Saints team, and I can't not include them in the top 3 right now. The best record at 8-2 in the NFC. And while I'm not convinced that Taysom Hill is the future for the Saints, I think for the next 3 games, he is more than capable of getting the job done, which is what we saw against the Falcons 2 days ago. At number 3, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're the only remaining undefeated team in the NFL. Am I entirely convinced that they're the second best team in the NFL? I'm not, but the bottom line is their stats reflect that. 10-0 in the NFL. And again, when your best wide receiver, who everyone thought coming into the year was going to be Juju Smith-Schuster, when you got a rookie wide receiver in Chase Claypool, who leads your team in reception yards with over 800, and you've got Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson backing him up. Eric Ebron is an underrated tight end. I love him. James Conner is a very solid runner with the football. And the bottom line is Big Ben Roethlisberger is playing like an MVP right now. You kind of forget that he actually has the best touchdown to interception ratio of his career. He's got the 4th best passer rating in the NFL with over 101, 2,500 yards, 24 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions. Again, this guy has been playing for years in the NFL, and he's got the best touchdown to interception ratio of his entire career. This team is special. They've beaten the Ravens. They've beaten the Titans. They've beaten the Colts. They have the best scoring margin in the league. They outscore teams by 12.4 points per game. They've outscored their opponents by over 18 points in their last 3 games. This Steelers team, listen, am I entirely convinced they're the number 2 team in the NFL? No, but this is a top 3 team, top 2 team right now. And if you think you'd want to play this team come postseason, you're sadly mistaken. Not to mention their linebackers, TJ Watt, 9 sacks. Bud Dupree, 8 sacks. Defensive end, Stephon Tuitt, 8 sacks. This team gets after the opposing quarterback. So they don't give you any time. Then Minkah Fitzpatrick in the secondary. So this team is stacked from top to bottom. And speaking of teams that are stacked from top to bottom, my number 1 team, the Kansas City Chiefs. Let me ask you a question right now. You've got your house to bet on. If you had to bet your house, Kansas City or the field, who are you going with? I'm sorry. I can't bet against anyone else. I don't care how close the game against the Raiders is. The bottom line is they won that game. They're 9-1. They've got the MVP in the league right now, in my opinion. Patrick Mahomes leads the NFL with over 3,035 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, best QBR in the league, 2nd best passer rating. They have a top 5 offense. Their defense makes timely enough stops. And I just can't bet against anyone other than Patrick Mahomes. I just can't do it. I can't do it. You put a gun to my head, I got to bet on this guy. He's not going to lose games, is the bottom line. And this is the most important thing about the Kansas City Chiefs. This stat right here is the most important thing. They've got the best scoring differential on the road. On the road, they outscore opponents 11.4 on the road. So if you think, oh, great, we're going to get Kansas City in our place. No, they've actually been playing better on the road this year than they have at home. And then you say to yourself, well, do you want to play them at Arrowhead Stadium in December, January? The answer is no. So Kansas City Chiefs are my number 1 team right now in the NFL. Morning Joe, right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube. Coming up in about 10 minutes or so, Jonathan Rifkind, my Pac-12 insider, and college football expert will be joining me in just a moment, about 10, 15 minutes or so. So let me transition quickly to the NBA. Couple free agency moves that I want to touch on. The Pelicans and Brandon Ingram have reached an agreement, have signed a deal. Brandon Ingram signing a max rookie deal worth $158 million over 5 years with the New Orleans Pelicans. Here's the one thing about Brandon Ingram. I understand he won the most improved player of the year last year. I understand he was a first-time All-Star. The problem is I am not entirely convinced that Brandon Ingram can be the number one player on a championship team. I'm just not quite there. He can be the face of your franchise. I know he's really good, but his style of play is really not conducive to winning. It's very ball-centric. He plays a lot of ISO ball. He's not great at creating for others. And right now, if you look at that team, I understand that Brandon Ingram is your best player, but Zion Williamson is the face of your franchise. And the guys that you're paying max dollars to, in my opinion, have to be the face of your franchise. We saw the Sacramento Kings sign De'Aaron Fox to that max deal. Well, that's because he's the face of their franchise. So I'm not entirely convinced that Brandon Ingram is a number one guy on a championship team. Happy for him that he got his money, but I think there's still some question marks about that. And then the Miami Heat apparently are nearing a max deal with Bam Adebayo to a max contract. The interesting thing about them is they're trying to make a run at Giannis Antetokounmpo next year. The problem is if they sign Bam Adebayo right now, they might have to gut out their team. If Bam Adebayo signs this contract now, next year when they try and trade for Giannis or try and create enough cap room, they're going to have to gut their team out. That's the problem. So right now, Giannis has till December 21st to make his decision about whether he wants to sign the Supermax contract or likely become an unrestricted free agent. But the problem is that I'm not sure entirely. You know, they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. So then finally, this was probably the dumbest decision that I've seen from the Sacramento Kings. So they don't want to match Bogdan Bogdanovic's 4-year, $72 million contract, and they're just going to let him walk. So what you're saying is the second best player on your team and for your future, who's a 4th-year player, you're just going to let him go. So what's the direction of the Kings right now? This was huge for the Hawks. I've talked about the past 2 weeks how big this is for the Hawks. But to me, this was such a dumb move. If you're the Sacramento Kings, makes absolutely no sense. Okay. Going to quickly talk about one other thing. Jonathan Rifkind is coming up. My Pac-12 insider, friend of the show and college football expert. He's going to be joining me in about 5 or so minutes. I do want to talk about one thing beforehand. And I'm sure he's going to be intrigued to hear about this, and I'll ask him about this when he joins the show. So the College Football Playoff Committee came out with their top 25, their first edition of the top 25 last night. And I'm not going to touch on it too much by myself in this kind of soliloquy. I'm going to talk to Johnny about this, but I do want to say this. This is a very ominous sign for the Pac-12. This is a very ominous sign for the Pac-12. The fact that the best team in your conference, Oregon, is ranked number 15 is a really, really troubling sign for this conference moving forward. Clearly, the committee has not been impressed with them. Clearly. They escaped with a victory versus UCLA, arguably a game that they easily could have lost. UCLA had a game-winning drive. If not for a false start, you replace a 2nd and 15 with perhaps a completion and a 2nd and 2 at the Oregon 40 with a timeout, 50 seconds remaining. They won that game. They could have lost that game. They had to come back versus Washington State, and they beat a depleted Stanford team. Now, I personally still think Oregon is a top team in college football. much to my own chagrin and much to the jubilation probably of Jonathan Rifkind. I do think they're a good team, and I don't think they should be ranked 15th. The problem is this. I've said this before, and I'll reiterate it now. There's never been a season that has valued style points more than this year. This is a truncated season, and the reality is style points have never carried so much weight than they do this year. We've seen in years past teams having to impress the committee in their conference championship game, maybe with 1 or 2 games remaining on their schedule. But never before has an entire season had to be defined by the manner in which you win games. Most of the time, you just get rewarded if you win. This year, has placed, because of how unprecedented this season is, it's never placed more of an emphasis on the style in which you win. And the reality is this is unfortunately an indictment against the Pac-12. And it reflects the current status of the Pac-12 right now. When Oregon's your highest ranked team at 15 and USC is the only other glimmer of hope you have at 18, and the only reason why they're undefeated, with the exception of the game against Utah, which is the first good game that they've played all year, they've had to rely on late game heroics and literally acts of God to allow them to win against Arizona State and Arizona. The problem is, the last time that a team from the Pac-12 made the college football playoff was 2016, 2017 with Washington. They lost to Alabama, and then Oregon made it to the championship game in the first edition of the college football playoff in the 2014-2015 season, lost to Ohio State. So only twice has a team from the Pac-12 made it to the college football playoff. And this is where having your own network and not aligning yourself with the more notable, reputable networks really hurts your conference. When these other networks have more accessibility to their local fan bases and a larger percentage of the revenue is going back to other teams, the Pac-12 gives the least amount of revenue back to the teams. This is where it comes to hurt you. And you exacerbate that by the fact that the Pac-12 unfortunately had a bunch of marquee non-conference games stripped from them. Oregon was going to play Ohio State. USC was going to play Alabama. Those are key marquee games that could have been used as measuring sticks to see where this conference is, juxtapose some of the other conferences. Now we are deprived of that. And unfortunately now that is why we're at where we're at. So, and with that, I'd like to bring on friend of the show, Pac-12 insider and college football expert, Jonathan Rifkind, to join the show. Jonathan, always great to have you. I know that this is a special day to have you with me because obviously it's always special when you come on, but you're on vacation right now and you're still taking about 10 minutes or so to join my show. So I appreciate that.
Oh, are you kidding me? This is my vacation right here, Jonah. The rest is work. This is way more fun than anything I have going on Thanksgiving week. Being part of Morning Joe on a Wednesday morning, are you kidding me? I love this stuff. Thanks for having me on, man.
So I know you just heard what I had to say. So I do want to ask you your reaction. So again, like I said, I think, the College Football Playoff Committee revealed their top 25. I think this is a really ominous sign for the Pac-12 right now. And again, it hurts me to agree that Oregon's not the 15th best team. They should be ranked higher based on their body of work.
Sure.
But the fact that a 2-loss Georgia team, the fact that a 2-loss Oklahoma team is ahead of them right now, how concerned are you about Oregon's chances and just in general a team from the Pac-12 getting a chance to make it into the college football playoff?
Well, first of all, Jonah, earlier you said, much to the jubilation of me, that Oregon is a top football team in college football. It's not jubilation. I'm actually relieved, because if you didn't think that, then you just would be a misinformed sports media person, right? You're a phenomenal analyst who's very articulate in breaking these things down. You would have really missed something if you didn't think that Oregon was one of the better teams. So it's more of a sigh of relief for me. Now moving on here to your question. So the College Football Playoff Committee is punishing the Pac-12. It's pretty simple. It's really tough to see a path for Oregon or USC to get in. Right now, the All-State Playoff Predictor, which is ESPN's analytics, has USC at like 3% to make it. Oregon's not even in the top 5 of that metric. Now, the College Football Playoff has Oregon up at 15. So they're looking at that and saying, okay, Oregon is above USC, but still 14 teams that at this point in time we consider to play in the College Football Playoff over the University of Oregon. Why is the Pac-12 being punished? Well, there's 3 big reasons why. We're not going to go into all of them here because our time is limited. I don't want to steal the entire show from you, Jonah, but it's a very long conversation, and it's a hard conversation because fans don't want to have this conversation because it takes the fact that you need to acknowledge that your conference is just being punished and you have to accept it. And it's really hard to accept it because it's not fair, but it's the state of college football in coronavirus times, right? This is the most uneven playing field that we have ever seen. And the Pac-12 was already a disadvantage, right? The preseason rankings with only 2 teams in didn't give you any indication after Oregon beat a Wisconsin team in the Rose Bowl, a very good Wisconsin team in the Rose Bowl, returned much of their front 7. Yeah, they had to replace all 5 offensive linemen, but they've had 2 offensive linemen of the week in the Pac-12. So obviously those linemen have been very good. CJ Verdell is back, the running back. The core running backs, all 4 of them. Cyrus Abibilikio, Travis Dye, CJ Verdell are all back. Tyler Shuck is really, really good quarterback. Joe Moorhead is calling plays phenomenally. Andy Avalos' defense is drawn up very well. So the pieces are all there, yet they still got disrespected coming into the season at 12th, and then they reached as high as 10. We see them now back at 15 in the college football playoff. Sample size is one of the biggest things right here, right, Jonah? When you look at the field, there's a team out there in BYU with 9 games played. They might have 12 games played by the time it's all said and done. The Pac-12 is going to have teams with 6. So how is it that a conference who has played 2 times fewer games than another team is going to get the benefit of the doubt? It's really hard to make that case. And you take it a step further, now the Pac-12 already was at a disadvantage. Like you said, this was the season, Jonah, for the conference to prove themselves. Ohio State, like you said, for Oregon, Alabama, and North Dakota State, by the way. North Dakota State is not a cakewalk for any FBS team. They were coming to Eugene. USC had Alabama and Notre Dame on their schedule. Arizona State had Michigan and Oklahoma State on their schedule. So this was the year for the Pac-12 to make a statement and show that they were at least competitive nationally, and it got stripped from them because of coronavirus. There's nothing that they can do about it, but that's just the unfortunate circumstance of the times that we're in right now. I'll leave it there. I'll let you follow up because there's a lot, of course, to get into with some of this stuff. So.
No, I listen, I appreciate the insight. And because again, it is one of these scenarios where, and yes, I know just every time.
Welcome everybody to Morning Show. I'm Jonah Malkin. Thank you so much.
Every other guest that I have on, I never have this issue of the split screen. You always show up on the left when we do. I think you're just trying to steal the spotlight from me.
I think that's what it is. I'm the host now.
So I definitely think it's interesting. Now, I might be the one person to think this. I actually think that this was a really encouraging sign for the non-Power 5 teams in Cincinnati. I actually think that moving forward, that Cincinnati right now is in a beautiful position to potentially leap into the top 4. I think this is the best chance for a non-Power 5 team to make it into the college football playoff. Now, again, I'm not saying that they will, but the fact that they're starting off at number 7, they have a bunch of quality wins, and then this is what's huge to me, Johnny, is the fact that Tulsa, who they close out the season with, crept into and checked in at number 25 in the top 25 rankings. I think that was big for Cincinnati to collect another win. Now, again, I don't know. I'm not going to say definitively that a Cincinnati is going to get in. I think there are other teams that will have stronger resumes, but I think that this is the best chance for a non-Power 5 team like Cincinnati to make it into the college football playoff. So what did you make of Cincinnati coming in at number 7?
Yeah, it's the highest that a Group of 5 team has ever been ranked at this point, at the very onset of the College Football Playoff Committee's decision making, the voting, right? It's a promising sign. Here's the thing, though, right? They're ahead of Northwestern right now. There's a lot of stuff that is going to have to happen nationally to get Cincinnati, and I know that they're ranked above some of these teams, but they need the two Big Ten teams, two ACC teams, or two SEC teams will get in over an undefeated Cincinnati if things pan out in one of those ways. It's Northwestern. They have Illinois, Minnesota, and Michigan State. Their final 3 games. None of those 3 games are probably going to convince the committee to put them over Cincinnati if Cincinnati goes and wins their final games. Especially, by the way, reports that on December 3rd, Cincinnati and BYU both have an off day, and they may actually schedule that game, which would be that's really important. That's a really important game if they can pull that off. If they don't, Cincinnati ending the season with Tulsa would be very beneficial because Northwestern's only win then over a ranked opponent, up to the point of the Big Ten championship is against Wisconsin. Wisconsin was great, or is a good team, and that's a great value win. But Wisconsin didn't play very well in that game. They didn't look like a top 10 team, and that's why Northwestern, yes, they got the benefit of the doubt, getting jumped into the top 8, sitting there at number 7. But a lot more needs to happen on there, and they need to go and win the Big Ten championship. If they do, then it's going to be Ohio State, Northwestern, and Cincinnati will get left out. Now, Clemson and Notre Dame in the ACC. Clemson, in my opinion, is probably still the best team in the country. I know that they're getting a lot of disrespect. They almost beat a Notre Dame team with Deji Uyunglele, the backup quarterback, in South Bend, and yet they're still getting disrespect. A lot of people not on the College Football Playoff Committee have Clemson at like 6 or 7. Clemson probably will go and win the ACC championship. Now, if they do, now there's 2 ACC teams that are deserving of getting in the College Football Playoff. And then finally, the SEC. You have Florida, who lost to A&M, sitting outside looking in. You have A&M, who beat Florida, but lost to Alabama on the outside looking in. A&M is not going to make it to the SEC championship because Alabama is going to out of the West. So the question, that puts them at a disadvantage. So when it becomes Florida and Alabama in the SEC championship, if Florida wins, well, now you have 3 one-loss SEC teams who have all beaten each other, right? You have Florida who beat Alabama, who beat A&M, who beat Florida. What do you do with that mess? So that's going to exclude the Group of 5. That's going to exclude the Big 12, who's already out of it, and that absolutely will exclude the Pac-12. So honestly, Cincinnati is sort of in the same position that Oregon is in. The question is that if the stuff that happens nationally with the other Power 5 conferences does, and Oregon and Cincinnati are undefeated and conference winners, you'd have to think that the Pac-12 is the team that gets the benefit of the doubt over the American champion. Now, that comes at a cost. If Oregon doesn't end up playing a ranked team in the entire season, USC in the Pac-12 championship is unranked and they win, it's probably not going to happen. But one ranked win this season for the Ducks could push them over the benefit of the doubt threshold if they're pinned up against Cincinnati for that 4th and final spot.
And it's going to be really interesting because the Iron Bowl is this weekend. And we know how often Auburn has thrown wrenches into the college football playoff final by beating Alabama
this morning. He is not going to be coaching. So
right. So that's going to be an interesting matchup to see, as it always is. I was a little bit surprised that Ohio State finished number 4. Not because I necessarily think that they're better than Clemson or Notre Dame. I think the reason I was surprised is because of how much respect the committee showed for Indiana by having them at number 12. I think that if the committee would have said, hey, Indiana is more like where Wisconsin's at, like a 16, middle of the top 25, then I'd feel like, well, Ohio State, it probably makes more sense to have them at number 4. But I think the fact that they have Indiana at 12, right on the surface of a top 10 team, I was a little bit surprised, not tremendously surprised that they were put at number 4. Was that at all a surprise to you, or did that seem like a no-brainer to have Clemson ahead of them?
That's the argument, is Ohio State, Clemson right now. It's not an easy argument to make because of sample size, right? Ohio State's played fewer games than Clemson. You can argue that their Big Ten strength of schedule up to this point is not as strong. And when you go and you look at these teams that they played, Indiana, their staple is their defense, honestly. Penix had a great game, but their defense is what's built their season up to this point. Same with Northwestern. Northwestern has a great quarterback transfer from Indiana, by the way, but it's been their defense. We saw 5 turnovers last week against Wisconsin, right? So Indiana I think they're as good as advertised, and I think that they deserve that respect and that benefit from the committee, because they ran a great game against Ohio State. They lost by a touchdown with an opportunity on that final possession to come back and tie. Now, they were at the 40-yard line in their own territory, and there's no way that Penix has the arm to get that anywhere near the end zone, which is what you saw. But the fact that they were even in that position against Ohio State is a really, really promising sign. I was kind of surprised they were even moved back. I could have seen them at 9, because honestly, Georgia at 9 over Indiana doesn't make sense in my mind. So I could have seen them in the top 10. I could have seen Georgia at 12 or 13. I'm not super upset with Georgia at 9. I know most people are, but regardless, it's pretty interchangeable. I do think, though, for Indiana, they deserve it because they played a great game. Ohio State they won a last-minute possession against Penn State, who's 0-5, right, or 0-4. So it's not like Ohio State's been particularly impressive, but because of the brand awareness, because of the benefit of the doubt, and because this is the Big Ten that we're talking about, they're going to stay in the top 4 no matter what. Honestly, if you look at the strength of schedule for Ohio State and the games that they played in 1-1 and the margin of error, and you look at Oregon, we can touch on that UCLA game if you want, but we got to wrap it up here, Jonah. I don't think that it's that different, like in terms of our expectations. Like Oregon's been somewhat disappointing against these teams, so is Ohio State. Yet Ohio State gets that benefit of the doubt because they're Ohio State. They have the brand and they play in the Big Ten.
What really hurts is Penn State 0-5 right now, because that was initially considered a great marquee road win. Now it's not looking the same. Okay, final question, then I'll let you go. I'm really looking forward to this Notre Dame at North Carolina game. Now, it hasn't quite resonated with me yet that North Carolina and Chapel Hill is associated with their football program, because normally their basketball program receives all the notoriety, garners all the attention, even though last year they had a down year. But I am extremely bullish about Sam Howell. I think that he's going to be a top 5 NFL pick next year because he's a sophomore right now, so he'll have to come back. I think he'll be a top 5 pick next year in the NFL draft. And to me, Johnny, I love their ability to run the football. Javonte Williams and Javonte Williams and Michael Carter. They're both in the top 10 for rushing yards in college football. Now, I know Notre Dame's got a great rush defense, but this is not the same Chapel Hill team. This is not the same North Carolina team that they've been in the past. Mac Brown has done a fantastic job turning around this program. I can't wait to see that matchup. How do you think that matchup is going to play out?
It's important, number one. Number two, it's going to be really fun. So obviously UNC, their big loss this season was to Virginia. They lost 44-41. Virginia is typically a pretty good team year in and year out. Defensively, they lost by 3. It is what it is. But they've had big wins. They're blowing everybody out other than that, right? North Carolina is a really good football team. Mac Brown is one of the best coaches in college football, not because he's going to lead this team to a college football playoff, because he turned North Carolina into it's the same thing at Indiana, right? These are basketball schools. If you see them in the top 10, top 15, you think we're looking at basketball rankings. We're looking at college football rankings. Sam Howell in my mind, the second best quarterback of the nation. He's not going to get picked. It's going to be Fields Lawrence. I think we're going to see Trey Wilson. I don't think Howell's going to be that high in the first round, Jonah. He's
this
deserving.
Next year.
Yeah, excuse me. I agree. I think he'll be deserving. We're going to see how that field pans out. Honestly, though, even of the seniors or of the juniors, I think that Howell is still a top 5 quarterback in the nation. You're absolutely right. UNC's offense is unparalleled. The reason that they lose is because of their defense. They got 44 points. They're a Virginia team that replaced their quarterback, 2 running backs, and 2 wide receivers, as well as 3 offensive linemen this past season, right? You can't really do that. So their defense is the question mark. They beat an NC State team who beat Liberty by 1 this past week. NC State's a pretty good team, always a solid program. Liberty was undefeated. I think they were 18 this week, right? 19 this week. So Hugh Freeze with his first loss this season. But my point is, UNC has every opportunity offensively to compete with Notre Dame. Whether or not their defense can stop Ian Book, that fantastic backfield, and even pressure the quarterback a little, because we've learned that Ohio State has a fantastic offensive line, Notre Dame has a fantastic offensive line. it remains to be seen. So that's the biggest thing. If they can go and they can score a bunch of points and get a key stop here or there, North Carolina can win this game. If they don't get big stops in the moments where it's prevalent, if they can't keep their offense off the field, getting the rest that Howell needs, and tiring out Notre Dame's defense offensively, then it's going to be a long, long day. But North Carolina absolutely has the tools and the players, the personnel to win this game.
Jonathan Rifkind, Pac-12 insider, college football expert, host of Just Recruiting and Believe in the Pac-12 with Ryan Leaf. Johnny, when are we going to see you back again?
Well, we just came out with our Pac-12 podcast with Greg McElroy, ESPN's Greg McElroy. He's fantastic. Had a lot of fun chatting with him about he was sort of the one who painted the idea that the Pac-12 was going to get punished, and he's okay with it because fewer games and all this stuff. So go check that out. We're on all listening platforms. We'll be back on Thursday, which is tomorrow, for a preview of this upcoming week slate of games for the Pac-12. Washington and Arizona State, Utah is now in the books because Arizona State for the third straight week can't go. We'll see what happens with Colorado. There's a chance that San Diego State ends up playing them. I doubt it, though. And then I'll be back on Monday as well. Matt Barry, not Matthew Barry, the fantasy expert. Matt Barry, the ESPN Sports Center host, will be joining us on the show as well. So make sure to tune in for all of that. And keep watching Morning Joe, because I didn't have my cup of coffee before this, but now I definitely need my cup of coffee after my blood pressure has risen from talking about the state of college football.
That tends to happen. Well, Johnny, thank you for joining the show. We'll talk again soon, man.
Absolutely, Jonah. Have a great one.
All right. Jonathan Rifkind, always glad to have him with me. Final topic of the day, Malkin's moments. I got a great Malkin's moment for you this week. It's not exactly the happiest Malkin's moment. It's actually kind of sad. So, unfortunately, the Wisconsin and Minnesota football game was canceled this weekend amid a high number of positive tests in the Minnesota locker room and on that roster. And it actually ends a streak of 113 straight years that Wisconsin and Minnesota have played each other in college football that are playing for the Axe. That ends a streak of 113 years, dating back to 1907 was the first time that these teams played. They had played consistently to 2019, and this is really an unfortunate end due to COVID to end that streak. So that's all the time that I got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me on Morning Joe on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube every Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Thank you so much for joining me, and as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.